All right, everyone, 10 a.m. on the dot. Good morning to you. And welcome to today's webinar, Real Estate and Water Rights, Navigating Permits and Transfers in New Mexico. On behalf of the New Mexico Association of Realtors and our partners, the Office of the State Engineer and the New Mexico Environment Department, I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here with us. We're looking forward to a truly enlightening and impactful session. My name is David Saavedra, and I serve as the Government Affairs Director for the New Mexico Association of Realtors. Water is one of our most precious resources, particularly here in New Mexico, where we're uniquely attuned to its value and the challenges that come with managing it. As realtors and professionals in the real estate sector, water rights intersect with nearly every transaction affecting property value, land use, and community planning. Whether we're talking about urban properties, agricultural lands, or rural developments, understanding water rights is fundamental to navigating real estate successfully in our state. Today, we're diving into some crucial questions. What exactly are water rights and why are they so important in the real estate industry? How can property owners and realtors work within New Mexico's unique regulatory framework to ensure that water rights are properly addressed in sale or transfer? What are the latest regulatory developments and what could impact permitting processes on water transfers? And perhaps most importantly, what role can each of us play in ensuring that New Mexico's water resources are managed responsibly and sustainably? To unpack these questions, we've brought together a distinguished panel of experts who are each deeply involved in water rights and environmental policy here in New Mexico. They'll be sharing insights into the legalities of water rights and practical challenges of permitting and transfers, and emerging trends that may shape the future of water management in our state. Let's take a moment to consider why this topic is so timely. New Mexico is one of the driest states in the United States, and our water resources are under more pressure than ever before. Population growth, increased agricultural demands, and changing climate patterns all contribute to a growing need for sustainable water management. Water rights are more than just an abstract concept. They're an essential part of land ownership that determines who can use water, how it can be used, and under what conditions. When water rights are transferred, it's crucial that we have clear, well-regulated processes to maintain transparency, protect communities, and ensure equitable access. For realtors, understanding the intricacies of water rights isn't just beneficial, it's essential. Water rights can often be a deciding factor for buyers, especially when it comes to properties in agricultural areas or places dependent on well water. Whether your clients are looking to invest in a rural property, subdivide land, or simply build their own dream home, they'll be relying on you to help them navigate these complex issues. That's why staying informed on this topic will enhance your ability to serve your clients effectively and ethically. Today's session will cover a few key areas. First, our panelists will provide an overview of New Mexico's water rights systems and what makes it unique. Then they'll discuss the permitting process, including the steps required for securing water rights and the various legal and environmental considerations involved. Finally, they'll dive into water transference, examining when and how water rights can be transferred and the potential impacts on real estate transactions. We'll also have time at the end for questions, so please feel free to submit those questions via the Q&A box as we go along. Our goal today is not only to provide you with the information you need, but also to give you the practical tools you can use to support your clients and work within New Mexico's water management framework. Thank you again for joining us today. This session will be recorded and we will share it out to our membership and get it over to the departments for their use as well. We're confident this session will provide valuable insights into the intersection of water rights and real estate, and we hope it empowers you to better navigate these essential issues in your work. Let's get started with today's discussion. So with that, I will pass it over to Jerry Pohl, who is the chief of the Statewide Projects Bureau with the Office of the State Engineer, to introduce her crew and kick off the presentation. Jerry, to you.
Thank you, David. We really appreciate this opportunity. This is the first time we've actually got to meet with the association, so we really appreciate you getting this scheduled for us. Good morning. My name is Jerry Pohl, and I work for the Office of the State Engineer, Statewide Projects Bureau, and I'm pleased for the Office of the State Engineer and the Environment Department to connect with the New Mexico Association of Realtor membership on the topic of real estate transactions and water rights. And with me today our David Anderson, who's the chief of the Water Rights Abstracting Bureau, who will show us how to query the database. And we've got 7 professionals that are listed here: John Montoya, Juan Hernandez, Jennifer Galindo, Cheryl Thacker, Richard Blecha, Ramona Martinez, Greg Cordery, or actually I've got Tim. Sorry, I didn't change my slide. Tim Farmer will be here in place of Greg, who had to be out in the field. And then we also have Michael Broussard from the New Mexico Environment Department Liquid Waste Bureau, who will speak on the permitting and ownership of septic systems. And first, let me say I'm a water rights specialist, not a water right attorney. And this is not intended to give you legal advice, but to raise your level of understanding of how water rights work and to give you some insight into researching water rights. So let's talk water rights. In 1907, the New Mexico Territorial Legislature enacted the first water code establishing that the right to the use of water, both as to the volume and the use, would be regulated by the state. Pre-1907 water rights are those that predate the water code and may be used without application to the state engineer. A landowner whose surface water use was developed prior to the 1907 water code may declare their right based upon prima facie evidence. In our New Mexico Constitution, Article 16 makes the water of every natural stream, perennial or torrential, not appropriated prior to statehood, belonging to the public and subject to appropriation for beneficial use. A water right is a right to beneficially use public water, not a right to own the water. Article 16 of the New Mexico Constitution also makes beneficial use the basis, the measure, and the limit of the right to use water. So beyond our Constitution, we have statutes and regulations. Everything you need to know about water law is on this page, nm1source.com. So we've got the US and state constitutions, state statutes, regulations, and then a lot of case history from the court system. So just to be aware, when I speak about a chapter in NMSA, I am speaking about a statute. And if you see longer numbers that begin with a 19, those are regulations for both surface water and groundwater, including domestic wells. So the statutes about surface water are located in 72-5 of NMSA. Groundwater is in chapter 72-12. And if you want to look for surface water regulations, that's 1926.2. Groundwater regulations is 1927.1. The well driller licensing and well construction regulations are 1927.4. And domestic and livestock regulations are in 1927.5. There are many others, but these are the main ones pertaining to administration. So I told you how surface water was addressed. Now let's shift to groundwater. The drought between 1885 and 1904 led to early groundwater development in the Roswell-Artesian Basin in eastern New Mexico and in the southwestern part of the state as well. Residents of the Roswell and Artesia areas drilled their first wells in 1891 and constructed the first large municipal well in 1903. In the 1930s, shallow groundwater development in New Mexico was extensive, and artesian aquifers were losing pressure. So in 1931, the legislature gave the state engineer control over groundwater administration, but only after declaring a groundwater basin. New Mexico was the first state in the union to establish groundwater management. Groundwater developed prior to a basin being declared are called pre-basin water rights. Those declarations are also prima facie evidence subject to review by the Office of the State Engineer. Today, there are 39 groundwater basins in New Mexico. Some are isolated or closed basins, and some are hydrologically connected to surface water. An isolated or closed basin encased by surrounding geology does not receive significant recharge from surface water or precipitation. All water that is now appropriated or transferred must be done so by a permit from the Office of the State Engineer. In some areas of any given groundwater basin, there is no water available to appropriate when we run hydrologic models on applications. Subsequently, the Office of the State Engineer has issued 11 special orders closing parts, or entire basins to any new appropriations. The map on the left shows those basins that are abstracted into our database or are in the process of being abstracted. On the right-hand side of the screen is a list of areas that have active adjudications. Knowing both of these pieces of information will help you in your due diligence search. Section 72-5-22 states in part that the transfer of title of land in any manner whatsoever shall carry with it all rights to the use of water appurtenant thereto for irrigation purposes, unless previously alienated in a manner provided by law, which means irrigation rights are appurtenant to the land, but other rights such as commercial or industrial are conveyed separately and must be described clearly. So these will create exclusions on the instrument of conveyance. A person may present a recorded deed stating that it comes with any and all water rights. They and the land may or may not have a water right, as the words on the deed are not the prevailing factor. According to one local water rights attorney firm, title companies in New Mexico do not write title insurance on water rights, and this is because the high level of risk in ensuring that a seller has proper title to valid water rights. I have even seen a deed that says this conveyance does not contain any water rights, as the water rights were previously separated and sold. But post-sale, the buyer took the seller to court and obtained a judgment to have those severed water rights restored, as he said that the seller misrepresented the land as not having any water rights. So that's how complicated water rights can be. How is that to preface this talk on real estate transactions and water rights? I will get into conveyance documents a little bit later. So there is a hierarchy to water rights documentation. A water right that has been declared has received the least amount of scrutiny, especially older declarations, which may or may not have been scrutinized at all, but they are still vulnerable to loss due to non-use. A water right that's created by an appropriation or by a transfer permit is not perfected until the permittee submits a proof of beneficial use. Until then, that right is unperfected. Once a proof of beneficial use is received by the Office of the State Engineer, we may issue a license for that water right for the amount perfected on the land described for the purposes that have been permitted. A license is the highest form of acknowledgement that the state engineer can issue. Lastly is an adjudicated water right. This is when a court establishes the elements of a water right in a water court. This is the highest form of recognition. So in New Mexico, the new owner of a property must file a change of ownership form with the Office of the State Engineer. If the person selling the property is not the owner of record with our office, then the person buying the property may need to bring in a chain of title back to the name that the OSE has on record. All water rights applications, change of ownership forms, declaration forms, and the fee schedule. And there are also informational handouts, and they're all available on the website form page. Both surface water and groundwater rights are property rights, and they may be conveyed by deeds separately or as part of the conveyance of the property. However, there is no general requirement in New Mexico that water rights be declared, resulting in many irrigation rights not yet documented with the Office of the State Engineer. Thus, title to those water rights must be traced through the title to the appurtenant land. Remember, I told you that water rights are appurtenant to the irrigated land, but they are not appurtenant to the land if they are used for other purposes such as industrial or commercial rights, unless their use is integral to the use of the property. It was not a requirement that a change of ownership be filed with the Office of the State Engineer until 1991, when the Dual Recording Act was passed. And in 1996, the statute was amended to require that the new owner file with the Office of the State Engineer and then record that filed copy in the county which the water rights reside. When you are representing irrigated land in a sale, make sure you are clear yourself on what acreage is being described on the instrument of conveyance. There is deeded acreage and then there is irrigated acreage, and sometimes they are not the same. Other instruments of conveyance that are acceptable with a change of ownership form include real estate contracts, which are acceptable when co-filed and signed by both the seller and the buyer, as the sale has not been completed yet. If you are seeking to file a change of ownership, this is the information you should seek to transfer a domestic water right. Ask yourself if there is a permit, adjudication, or declared document for that domestic water right on file with the Office of the State Engineer. If not, the new owner of the property may file a 72-12-1.1 application to get it permitted. The deed or a valid conveyance document must be conveyed with present title. All persons listed on the conveyance document must be included on the change of ownership and must sign the change of ownership form. Is this well being shared? Is the landowner the well owner of the use of the shared well or just a user of the shared well? And lastly, we must update the list of persons sharing the well, as regulation requires that this list be kept current on shared wells. Additionally, are there meter readings required, and are they submitted, and are they up to date? Does the use of the well match the purpose for which the well was permitted to be used? For example, if it was permitted for domestic one household, but there are several houses connected to it, or they're additionally serving livestock, they need to change the purpose of that well. If the owner or the new owner, if not, then the owner or the new owner may file the application to have it re-permitted. Domestic water rights permitted under 72-12-1.1 may not be transferred, and like irrigation rights, stay with the property where the water right is placed to beneficial use. Typically, the conveying document will include explicit conveyance language of the domestic water right or well, such as the well and the water right for domestic use are located in the northwest corner of the property. But if the document does not explicitly convey language, then the water right, you may need to look backwards to see if the water had been transferred to a mutual domestic prior to 2010. Prior to 2010, the indoor usage of domestic wells was allowed to be transferred until the law changed. So if the water was previously transferred to a mutual domestic water consumer association, then we would then notify the owner of that well that the MDWCA now serves the property and that the indoor usage is no longer there. If the well was retained by the landowner for outdoor watering, we would have required a meter installation. And we will accept a change of ownership on those. If no outdoor watering was retained, we may just return the change of ownership to the new owner. Also, we need to make sure that the deed or the conveyance document is already recorded with the county clerk in which the county and the water right is located. And lastly, we look for signatures on the change of ownership to make sure that they match the names on the deed and that it's been signed in front of a notary public. So, transferring irrigation rights. We need to look to see if the water right is on record. Are they conveying all or part of an irrigated parcel? Has there been a survey to show the split? Is there a deed or a valid conveyance document conveying present title? Again, all persons listed on the conveyance document must sign the changes of ownership. Does the information on the conveyance document match the information on the change of ownership? Is the place of use listed on the change of ownership the same as on the conveyance document? As I stated, deeded acreage may very well be different than irrigated acreage. Most instruments of conveyance are silent to it, but some are specifically identified. Due diligence is still expected, as the OSE will not accept an instrument that that attempts to convey rights that we do not recognize. So again, is there any language on the conveyance document that expressly reserves the water right? Is there any language on the conveyance document that would indicate that the water is not intended to remain with the property, such as the seller conveys all property less and except 2 acres of water rights, or the seller conveys all property and reserves the water rights? That's the language that you want to look for on the conveyance document. So again, we want to make sure that it's permitted, adjudicated, or declared and on file, and that signatures are on the changes of ownership in front of a notary. So the main concern in New Mexico is whether the water right has been used consistently since it was permitted or first used. All water rights, including those vested prior to the adoption of the New Mexico Constitution, are not immune from statutory forfeiture or common law abandonment. If a water right has not been used, it could be subject to forfeiture or abandonment. Well, what is forfeiture? Before 1965, water rights could be forfeited for a period of non-use of only 4 years. In 1965, the statutory scheme was changed to require that the state engineer send out a notice of forfeiture and give the water right owner a year to cure the non-use. Very few notices have ever been sent out. So many inquiries for non-use for forfeiture focus on the pre-1965 period. In the Estancia Underground Basin, the district office has sent out a few forfeiture letters, and if any letter has been sent out, that would be located in the state engineer file. Well, what about abandonment? Generally, a period of 16 years of non-use is considered long enough to imply a rebuttable presumption of the intent to abandon. Evidence that we look for are the baseline, or the evidence we look at is the baseline under which the OSC reviews non-use. And it could be that there is no access to water. That's usually the big one. The ditches have been cut off or the well is no longer in use. So your due diligence search for searching for records, there's 3 ways to research a recorded water right and the documents within the file. You can access the New Mexico Water Right Reporting System online portal, which David Anderson will be presenting next. And that searches our internal waters database, and it's accessible from our website, www.osc.nm.gov. And it allows you to look up an OSC file by its assigned number, location, or owner's names, and see all the related permits and logs in one folder. Limited by the information on the paperwork, it may be difficult to look it up if the information is not on the database, because it only searched the information that was input from the public document. So searching online from the OSC pod locations map will allow you to enter an address to see all the points of diversion, which POD stands for points of diversion, and then access water rights documents and well information based upon that location. This is particularly useful for groundwater rights and wells, as you can search in so many ways, but it's really not the tool to use when you're looking for surface water rights. And lastly, you can come in person to the district office. So validity of and Title II water rights are the crux of our conversation today. So in your due diligence search, you can look in the state engineer file for any memos or letters, reference the water rights and the history of the permits. There will be field inspection or reports, assess the water features, documentation provided by the seller. For forfeiture and abandonment, you want to, again, ascertain whether there were 4 years of non-use prior to 65, which may imply the forfeiture by operation of law. Any letters warning of forfeiture after 1965. And sources of information to investigate historic uses could be the maps of the Middle Rio Grande, irrigation district records, such as plain table surveys from 1926 in the Middle Rio Grande, hydrographic survey maps. That's only available in small portions of the state. Photographs and aerial imagery showing irrigation, and those can be obtained either from the State Engineer's Office, Soil Conservation District, the Earth Data Analysis Center at UNM, it's called EDAC, or private or commercial sources of photos, such as Google Earth Pro. Also, you can look for affidavits. Are there existing ones? You might be able to interview old timers or current landowners and draft affidavits. Describe the property specifically, such as the tract number if it's in an irrigation district. Make sure that they are specific in describing the uses of the water and the types of crops are grown and how the affiant knows these facts. And lastly, does the seller own the water rights free and clear? You may have to do a title investigation and clean up the title if needed with releases or quitclaim deeds. And transfers. Some of the adjudications in settlement talks either reduce the amount of water per permitted domestic well or require transferring a water right from the surface to a well. Often the sale of a water right is made contingent on the transfer of a water right. When the seller and the buyer co-apply and are able to obtain a permit for the water to be used at the new location and usually for a different purpose, then the sale is completed and the water rights are then transferred into the buyer's name only. Only the consumptive use from any water right is transferable. The consumptive use for irrigation is called the consumptive irrigation requirement, which is determined by the amount of water that the crops must use in a specific region of the state. In some transfers, a acequia or community ditch approval may be required. After 2003, transferring rights from an acequia community ditch requires an extra step before the application can be submitted to the OSC for transfer. 72-5-24.1 requires that the acequia or ditch must have passed bylaws requiring that the change of point of diversion or place of purpose of use of a water right served by an acequia or affecting it shall be subject to approval by the acequia commissioners. Significantly, if the acequia has not passed bylaws and failed to protest a transfer application, the acequia cannot later intervene in the state engineer's proceeding. Then there's publication and protest. After filing an application and with the appropriate fee for the with the state engineer's office, the office prepares a notice for publication that is posted on the OSC website and given to the applicant to publish in a newspaper once a week for 3 consecutive weeks. Then we await a specified 70-day protest period. The notice letter to the applicant specifies which newspaper or newspapers must be used, no longer leaving that choice to the applicant's discretion. The newspaper will send an affidavit of publication to the applicant, and the affidavit must be filed with the Office of the State Engineer within that 70-day period. The written protest to that application can be faxed to the Office of the State Engineer to meet the deadline. To remedy any protests, there's either hearing or mediation. Our agency is quite fond of mediation to settle water right disputes. Simply having a protested application can extend the permitting time up to a couple of years if we have to go to hearing. So now I'd like to show you how the OSC pod location map works and its benefits and limitations. As I said, POD is an abbreviation for point of diversion. So we're not looking up water right files, we're looking up points of diversion. So clicking on the water right lookup button will, from the main page, will access the database, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Both are reflecting information from public record, but you can search the database by OSC file number and only by pod on the map. The way that we measure and describe lands and wells on permits and forms have changed many times since 1907, and we have 117 years worth of data that we house. When errors exist in public record, it takes another public record to fix it. For instance, a well owner can come in and complete a form in the district office, and there's no fee associated with this form to correct the location of their well. We can also, at the same time, issue to the well owner a well ID tag and a stainless steel band to install on their well. You may not find the well where you expect it to be on the map, and there's always a reason. If the public record had no coordinate, X and Y coordinate on the well that's recorded, but it was recorded in public land surveying system using quarter, section, township, and range. When the map plots it, it will put it in the center of that description. Or a well may be in a land grant, but in the documents, it was using projected section, township, and range. And the map will plot those at 00 coordinates as land grants were not publicly surveyed. Information can be queried in any fashion on this map, and all the records within the vicinity will appear. This differs from querying the database, where you are querying the information in the database that was entered from the public record. Depending on what information you have, there's different ways to search. So now let's go live with the OSE pod location map. My notes out here. Okay. So from the home page, you can access the agency's YouTube channel. There are many tutorials on this page. It includes an in-depth training on this map here, the OSE pod location map, but there's also tutorials on how to complete applications and changes of ownership. So beyond this training today, there are other resources available if you want a more in-depth look on how to file these documents or to look up things on the map. So up here at the top, you'll see a link to Water Rights Lookup, and that will take you to a page where you can access both. This step 4 is where you can access the New Mexico Water Rate Reporting System, or you can access the OSE pod location map. And each of them will allow you to toggle back and forth between the two of them. So there's a button up here at the top that says Water Rights, which takes you to the New Mexico Water Rate Reporting System. And here under Other, there is an OSE pod location online mapping tool link, which again takes you back to the map. So the map is really useful because you can search by address, you can search by pod number, you can actually search by names if you're in Doña Ana County parcel. I don't know why that's the only one that has the name available to search by. You can also search by acequia name or ditch name, and you can search by well driller license number to get all of the wells that are drilled by a certain driller. There is point location. This first button here, the coordinate search, allows you to change the way that you are searching the database by a coordinate. Either you can set it to state plane X and Y. You may have a document from the court, and that's how the well was described. There's also UTM meters. You can set it up for degrees, minutes, and seconds in Latin long, or you can do decimal degrees in Latin long, or you can search by quarter, section, township, and range. So those are the 4 ways that you can search from the coordinates. You can also click on a map and get a location here and change the output of that location if you're wanting to do that. Pod search here allows you to search by the OSE pod number. There's a drop down for the basins. You would select the basin and enter in the number and then possibly a suffix. And then you would click search and it would search for that pod number. There's also a way to search by owner name. There are some limitations as they have to join several fields within the waters database in order to create this layer. So if there are more than 2 people listed as owners, you may or may not be able to find them as the owner, depending on how many people are listed as owners of that well. Again, this allows you to search by the well driller license number to see all the wells that are drilled by a certain license number. And lastly, you can search by drawing a polygon in a certain area, and it will return to you all of the wells that are located within that polygon. And lastly is a buffer search. If you want to see all the wells within a certain area, you can click map click and then click on the map and then set the distance and units of measure and clear or search for all the wells within there. You can also turn layers on and off on this map here. I'm going to shut off a few of them just to shut off some of the noise in the background so that I can show you how to search in different ways here. So the biggest thing that I wanted to point out is the water right regulation area. As you can see on this map, there's a lot of different colored shaded areas and then little blue lines that are creating different polygons. So those little blue lines are showing you where a driller may encounter artesian conditions, and artesian wells are a little more expensive to construct. They need special casing, need additional sealants, and the driller, frankly, will need additional equipment in order to contain the flows. So wells, not every well within those areas are artesian, but this is to give people idea that once the driller drills through the alluvium soils, if he taps into a confined aquifer, the construction costs for those wells will be significantly higher than a regular non-artesian well. Nextly is critical management areas and basin guideline areas. This map here does not split the difference between the two, but there are differences between critical management areas and those areas that have basin guidelines. But any area that you see that is shaded in pink, that is to bring awareness to the public that lands within those areas have groundwater guidelines and that direct how the water can be used and moved. So next we have quality restriction areas. These are the shaded red areas, and those are locations where the state or federal government has identified contamination that is in excess of what is allowable, and the cleanups are taking longer than it should. These restrictions are in bright red to show you where drilling is restricted. Next, we've got local ordinance areas, and those are lilac with a green outline here, and those are identified by counties and municipalities that create local ordinances restricting drilling, or it could require hookup to municipal lines that are within certain distances. Then we have special condition areas. Those are shaded in orange, and they are usually created by courts of law during adjudications, such as in this Gila, San Francisco area here on the Arizona border. And then if you notice here in District 6 above Santa Fe, the Nambe, Powake, Tesuque, those are examples of special condition areas that are imposed by adjudication courts. Next, we have negative easement areas. Right now, you'll only see these down here. They are kind of purple outline here along the Pecos River. And those show where water rights have been permanently retired to help the state meet their interstate obligations. Some lands in the lower Rio Grande are participating in temporary fallowing programs. Those are not shown on this layer because they are not in negative easements. And then lastly, we have basin closures. Basin closures are when the Office of the State Engineer has issued special orders closing those areas to new appropriations due to diminishing water supplies. And those areas, you cannot get a new appropriation, but you can move water rights around in certain circumstances. And so that is probably the most important part of the map here. And I want to show you, if you see a layer that's grayed out, it's because you have to set the visibility range. And so right here, you slide the bar up until the wells start to draw. You will only see 1,000 features that can draw in any layer. If there are more than 1,000 features, of course, most of these have more than 1,000 features, you will see them as you zoom in, more wells will appear. So the blue dots, all these colors mean something. Blue dots mean that it was permitted and we have a well log. If it's a green dot, such as up here in the top part of the state, there's many more. Those are ones where either it was pre-basin and the well is declared and we don't have a well log on that, or it could be a permitted well that we're waiting on a well log. So those are the two different instances. If the dot is yellow, that means it's a well that has changed location. So the previous well likely went dry. So most of these are showing the second or third well that's being drilled. But knowing that yellow well means that that property has had more than one well drilled through time by permit. If it is a black dot, it's either an inactive or incomplete well log. The orange dots are capped wells, red dots are plugged wells, and if they're pink, it's their location information or information about the well has been updated within the last 30 days. We only take the data from the database every 30 days to create this GIS waters pod, but the ones that are created in the interim are in this other layer, recently edited pods. So those are the differences between those two layers. And you may have some gray dots out there, and it's because the status is unknown. So the OSE map is reflecting the pod location information as it was recorded in the public. So again, if the well is not exactly where it should be, it's because we are just trying to reflect the public record. So I'm going to show you 4 quick things, and then I'm going to turn it over to David. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to search by the Doña Ana parcel name. You can put in a last name and search for it, and it will pop up with the names that match there, and you can click on the information. Whoops, sorry about that. You can click on, yeah, it's going all crazy on me now. So that's the one way you can do it, by searching by owner name. You can search by an address. And let me get an address. And this one leans cleanly on a house, as you can see. And then you can either click on the wells that are around the area or the address that you went to. And if it is the name, the owner that you're looking for, you can click more information, which will take you to the permit and well log location from that particular well. Or you can draw a polygon around that location. You can draw a polygon such as this, and all of the wells in that area will show up in this drop-down menu. You can hover over them and see if, maybe the well is a bit away from the address that you were looking up. You can also click the button to download those into an Excel spreadsheet. And it will come back to you like this, maybe not with all the information that you want, but at least you can walk away with a list of the wells that are in the vicinity of the location that you're looking at. And if you're looking up by section, township, and range, you have to start with the quarter section first, and then you would work backwards in your entry. So, and then put in your section, and then your township, and then your range, and then hit update. And it'll take you to that location. And it'll even draw a box around it. And so you can then, again, hover over them, click on them, or you can select them as a group, or you can look it up by pod number. And then it'll take you directly to that pod. You can open up the information and click on more information. And again, it'll take you to the permit and the well log for that particular well. And that concludes my section of the presentation. And I'm now going to turn it over to David.
Right. Thank you, Jerry. Good morning, everybody. As Jerry said, my name is David Anderson. I'm with the Office of the State Engineer Water Rights Abstract Bureau, and I'm going to go over some of the capabilities, tips, and tricks for the New Mexico Water Rights Reporting System known as NMWRS. So I'm going to jump right into that since we have limited time. Across the top ribbon on the OSE homepage, come across the Water Rights Lookup. And then before you start actually going into NMWRS to search for water rights records, I'm going to come across and find the abstracted areas map. And this will give you some idea as to whether or not you're actually going to find the record online. So make sure the legend is activated. And you see the blue means that the abstract for that basin is complete in our water rights database. Gray is incomplete. So I'm not saying that you won't find any records online for the gray areas. However, you have to be aware that the record is going to likely be incomplete and it will lack the quality assurance that we provide on the areas in blue or the in progress areas. Of course, in progress means that we're working on adding files from those areas. So you may or may not find the file that you're looking for. So in those cases, you want to visit the appropriate district office. For example, if you need to find a file in Tucumcari Basin, you'll have to contact the District 7 office in Cimarron. So with that, let's go back to the water rights lookup. You'll come down to step 4 to enter the system. So I'm not going to go over every search feature in here, just a few. So first, we're going to search in the water rights summary. And in the water rights summary report, you can search by water right file or owner name. I'm first going to demonstrate searching by owner name. So there is a drop-down menu to select the basin, which you would normally find on the on a water right document. If someone has a file number, this will be the prefix. But we're going to search by first name. And for example, I want to search for any well or water right owned by Caroline Hinckley. So I'm not sure how Caroline is spelled with an I or Y, so you can use the asterisk to wildcard it. There's a prompt here for you in case you don't remember that. Same with Hinckley. So before I run the report, there are a number of reasons why I always encourage use of the wildcard in this search. First, of course, are the alternate spellings of the names that I mentioned. Also, it'll help overcome potential misspellings. We key all this data in, and even though we do quality control our data, sometimes things still get missed. Also, sometimes applicants don't actually proofread their own documents before filing them. Furthermore, if someone has provided a middle initial or middle name, we don't have a middle initial or name field in our database. That may be entered in the first name field, but you won't know that. So again, use the wildcard to capture any records with the middle initial or name. Also, there are certain last names that have spaces, or maybe they're spelled with no spaces, such as McDonald, Del Valle, and others. Finally, these fields don't handle corporate names very well. So if the property is potentially in a trust, you want to wildcard in the last name field to capture any trusts. Okay, so with that, I want to search by current and previous owners of record, this radio button, and I'm just going to have an output of HTML. So here, so we found the file for Caroline Hinckley. Here's the file number. If you click that hyperlink, it will take you to the water rights summary. So the top gives information about the water right. It's just a domestic well permit for one household, 3 acre feet. If you scroll to the documents on file, they're organized from newest to oldest. But at the bottom here, you see the original permit and well record. If you click the Get Images link, it'll bring up another image list with the application or permit and the well record. And you click that, and there's the scan of the document itself. So I wanted to actually exit that, but the share screen is in my way. So we'll just come back this way. Okay, so next I'm going to use the water right summary to search by water right file number. So I'm going to look up a surface number. So the basin field is a drop-down menu, and I know I'm looking for surface declaration 01930. And again, we have this note to use the asterisk to wildcard search the suffix field. And I'll show you the difference here. If I run this, this is going to be the water right file for Acequia del Medio del Prado. And you see, I only get the one record, although we did add this note to see all these other files, because these are the individual water right files on the Acequia. So if I go ahead and add the wildcard in the suffix field and I run the report again, I'll get a much longer list of individual water rights. You see all these hyperlinks to the individual water right files. So we can just click one of them, and again, it'll take you to the summary page and all of the documents that we have on file. Okay, so I'm going to clear that. So next we're going to go down to this point of diversion and well ID tag report. Actually, it's a series of reports, and I'm only going to demonstrate a few. So this has a series of panels that you can click on to open and close. And the note indicates that any of them that are open will be searched, even at the same time. So you want to close them off, you just want to run a single search. The one I'm going to demonstrate is the UTM NAT83 radius search. The reason being is I think most of these other reports are pretty intuitive, but not the UTM NAT83 radius search. So this uses point coordinates to search for wells and therefore access water right files. It works for UTM zone 13 only. So pull this over. So UTM stands for Universal Transverse Mercator. Again, it's a type of coordinate system. In New Mexico, part of the state is in zone 12. So the western part of the state, you can't use this report to search it. In the pod locator tool that Jerry demonstrated, it will display zone 12 and zone 13 coordinates. You just can't use them in the NIMWAR search, only zone 13. So I realize that most people, they may be pretty good at getting latitude and longitude now, but not UTM. How would you get coordinates in UTM to do the search? Well, you go to the mapping tool. You come up to the widgets and you click coordinate search. With your manual input, you can set your input reference. So I am going to choose geographic and decimal degrees. You have to set it. On my output, I want to change this to UTM. So let's say I want to search for 33.116 degrees north, 107.292 degrees west. Click update location. The map will zoom to that location and it'll give you the coordinates for this point, this blue diamond. So you can take these, you can go back into NIMWARS, and you can enter those UTM coordinates into the search. So you can set your search radius from this point in meters. So we're going to do a 100-meter search. You can select your sort by criteria in the report. We're going to sort by distance, meaning the distance from this point that we entered, and run the report. When you're searching large amounts of data, the report may take a few seconds to generate. Okay, so here's our report. You see it's sorted by distance. But if you look at all of these wells, they're the same distance from the point. Well, obviously, they're not actually built on top of each other. But right here in the Y coordinate, you note the asterisk. And if you scroll to the bottom of the report, we have a note that this location was derived from PLSS. You may recall Jerry mentioning that our old standard was PLSS only and a 40-acre description at that. And you see all these wells here, they have the same PLSS, southeast quarter of the southwest quarter, section 6, township 14 south, range 4 west. So the derived coordinates are the same for all of them. So from this report, if you click the map icon, it will take you to Google Maps and show you where the well is. You can also click the water right file number, and that'll take you to the water right summary. And again, any images for documents that are available. Again, you just click the link to the images. You can view application or well record. And you can bring the image up. Okay, so the last report that I want to demonstrate is the search by subdivision. So if you come down to the left-hand menu under Other Reports and click Search by Subdivision. So we have this big disclaimer here at the top, but what you need to know about this is that if the subdivision information was not provided on the form, it's likely not entered in our database, and so the search won't find a record for a subdivision that we have not entered into the database. Again, it has to have been provided to the agency on the agency form by the applicant or permittee. So again, this is a field where you can do the wildcard search. I always recommend that you wildcard at the beginning of the name and at the end. So for demonstration purposes, we're going to search for all records with the subdivision name Butterfield in the name. So here's our list, and you see that there are different subdivisions, some in even different counties, but they all contain the name Butterfield. This is useful if you happen to know the lot, block, and unit of the particular subdivision, but not the file number. So you can scroll through, potentially find that, and find the file number. And again, the hyperlink will take you to the water rights summary and NMWRs. Again, scroll down, and you can find the documents on file with links to the images. So finally, the last thing that I want to show you is that we do have this help button here. You probably saw in a lot of those reports I ran, there are these abbreviations and codes, and they may not mean anything to you, but if you click this help link, we do have lists of all the codes. So the basin codes, if you don't know what e-basin is, you click this link and we have a document that gives you the full name, E would be Estancia, etc., the county abbreviations. That's how you would find that information. Since I moved everything around, but I appreciate the time.
Thanks, David. Now, if we can queue up District 1 in Albuquerque.
Yeah.
Hi, so my name is John Montoya, and I work for District 1 here in Albuquerque, New Mexico for water rights. I work with domestic wells. I just have a small form that I'm going to go over of some of the things that we do and what the regulations are within District 1. Here at District 1 office, we administrate different basins, but these are going to be the ones that we do. District 1 office oversees the following basins, which is Rio Grande, specifically Middle Rio Grande, the Upper Tularosa, Sandia Basin, Estancia Basin, Blue Water Basin, and also Gallup. The basin requirements for RG, MRG are going to be, which is going to include Sandia, Upper Tularosa, Blue Water, Gallup, with some of the restrictions specific to the area. Number 1 will be new domestic well permits will receive 1 acre-foot per household with no meter. Number 2 will be shared domestic wells can serve up to 12 households with a total diversion of 3 acre-feet. That would be total between all 12, so they would share that 3 acre-feet between the 12 households. No outside watering will be used if 6 or more households are put on one system. All shared wells must be metered. It's just the first point of diversion, so we're not requiring them for each person. It's just going to be the first one, so we can capture the total amount of water coming out of that well that's serving the multiple households. Also, number 4 would be domestic and livestock wells will automatically receive a 3 acre-foot diversion with no meter required. There is a couple exceptions that we have in the Gallup Basin, which is going to be the number 1 that we just received recently, which is the ZRB, which is the Zuni River Basin. It is now having restrictions that we will be giving 1 acre-foot per household, 3 acre-foot for livestock, and meters will be required. And we will be requiring 2 times a year for the meters to be entered into our system. Number 2 is the ZRCPA, which is the Zuni River Basin Critical Protection Area. That one is only allowing ½ acre-foot for all new domestic wells. So it'll be for single household livestock wells. They are all going to require meters on them as well. Twice a year, you will report them to us. And again, it's only ½ an acre-foot in that area. Number 3 is going to be ZSL. Again, that's another one where it's the Zuni Salt Lake. And that one is going to be the same, which is ½ an acre per household, ½ an acre for livestock, again, metered, and twice a year that you need to report those meters to us. And then in the next basin where we have other things that we have to go through as well, and Estancia has some different restrictions, is going to be all the new wells in the Estancia Basin are going to be ½ an acre-foot per household. Meters are required on all of these new wells going in place in Estancia Basin. Shared wells are going to be ½ an acre-foot per household and up to 3 acre-feet total. Again, after that 3 acre-feet, after the 3 homes, then it just gets split into multiple homes, but you never get more than 3 acre-feet of water for those households for a shared well. And also the livestock wells in Estancia still get 3 acre-feet of water, and it is a not metered well as long as they are just livestock wells. And those are just kind of some of the overview of what we have within our area. You can always call our offices, and if you have any questions about what you're trying to accomplish with the well, changing ownership, what rules and regulations are within the area, you can give our office a call, and all these things are also online as well. So that's all we really have here at District 1. It's just kind of a small overview. But again, you can always reach out to our district office for any questions, and we're always willing to help.
Thank you so much, John. Next up is Juan from Roswell.
Yeah, good morning.
Yep, Juan, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. All right, good morning. I'm I'm the district manager here at the Roswell office, District 2. It's located in Roswell at 1900 West 2nd. So what I'll discuss briefly the basins that we administer, that the District 2 office administers, which is it's 11 basins. Okay, here we go. So District 2 is a large area that we cover, and it covers primarily most of southeast New Mexico. The basins that we administer are the Roswell Artesian Basin, Capitan, Carlsbad, Caucilingo, Curry, Fort Sumner, Hondo, Jalali, and Peñasco, Portales. Of those basins, David Anderson mentioned some of these basins are, we have all of the records, historical records have been abstracted and imaged, except for 3 out of this district office. And those are the Roswell Basin, Portales, and Carlsbad. So any records that you wish to access for those particular basins, please do not search the water state of the database. You will contact the office or come in the office to look up those records. Any entries made into the water database are outdated and probably were made about 20 years ago. So I just wanted to point that out. So those basins, any document that you wish to file with this district office, or domestic well declaration, water right application, any application will come in here to the Roswell Basin. To the Roswell district office. The other item that I wanted to touch on is, since we're talking about domestic wells, there are 2 municipalities and 1 town, the Village of Verdoso, the City of Hobbs, and the town of Tatum, that have domestic well restriction ordinance. And one of the ones that we deal the most with is the Village of Verdoso. If you go to the website, and Jerry demonstrated how to get to this, you may click on that area around the Village of Verdoso, and it'll bring up that box. And at the bottom, if you scroll down, there will be a PDF with a copy of that ordinance. Okay. In the Roswell area, we have a temporary moratorium for 30 years of drilling of any shallow well. That includes domestic or irrigation well, and it's located just south of Roswell. And this again, so in order you can actually get a variance, but the New Mexico Environment Department will have to authorize that variance. And we have actually issued 1 well permit in that area. It's an irrigation well. Domestic wells are probably not likely to be issued in this area until the remediation is completed. The other item that I want to highlight and talk about here in the Roswell area, and it's in Chavez and Eddy County. There are lands that were purchased by the New Mexico Interstate Stream Commission years ago and then were sold back. And those lands were for the purpose of acquiring water rights for the Pickles River Compact, or Pickles River settlement agreement. So what happened there is, after those lands were sold, there was a new requirement imposed on those lands, and that means that, and what that requirement is no wells, no domestic wells, or any water rights can be, no domestic wells, I apologize, cannot be drilled on those lands without bringing a water rights, transferring a water right to that well, or if a person wishes to irrigate on that land, a water right must be transferred onto those lands. And that's the only way a well can be drilled on any of these lands. And those lands are, actually, we have shape files on the spot finder, and those are, you'll see them labeled in green. And those, you can see those, again, on the plot finder tool. And those are located in the in the Chavez County and Eddy County. I don't know, I believe there was some land purchase maybe in Vaca County, but I'm not quite sure. But I know that in Chavez County and Eddy County, we do have those restrictions for these lands that have a negative easement imposed on those. And that's it. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Juan.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Next up is Jennifer Galindo from Demi.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jennifer Galindo. I'm the RAB manager for the District 3 office in Demi. Our district manager here is Lloyd Valentine. Donna Hernandez's contact information is on here as well. She's one of our water resource professionals. She's one of the main people in our office that has a great working relationship with the realtors in our area. She's a big help in researching well logs, ownership, etc. We're in charge of the southwestern portion of the state with 12 basins in our district. The 12 basins included in our district are highlighted in yellow on this map and listed on the left. Most of these basins have 72-12-1 domestic household wells that are given an amount of water of 1 acre foot per annum. However, some older wells were grandfathered in with 3 acre feet per annum. We do have a couple of basins that have unique restrictions for the wells permitted in the area. I'll go over the uniqueness for those that are in our district, specifically for the 72-12-1 wells. The first basin with a unique restriction is the Members Basin. There's a portion of the basin that is restricted to a depth of 230 feet under Order 46. The amount of water given is still the same. The wells that are drilled or to be drilled in townships 25 South, ranges 6 and 7 West, and Township 26 South, ranges 6 and 7 West, are conditioned with the condition on this slide. Next is the Gila San Francisco Basin. This is a large basin that has all 72-12-1 domestic household wells restricted to indoor use only. If outside watering of any kind will be used, a valid water right is required to be moved into the well. The condition listed on each domestic permit for this basin is stated on this slide as well. Next is the San Simon Basin. It's a very small basin, but it has its uniqueness. In this basin, all 72-12-1 domestic wells are limited to 0.6 acre feet per annum. This is for all permits after 2002, based off of an order issued by at the time, San Simon Water Master Robert Rogers on September 17, 2002. It states in part, now therefore, in order to provide for the continued orderly development of water use from domestic wells, the Water Master hereby adopts the following policy. Effective September 17, 2002, permits for domestic wells in the San Simon Creek system shall be approved for an amount of water not to exceed 0.6 acre feet per annum diversion and 0.17 acre feet per annum consumption. In our district, we still have 3 basins that have not been completely abstracted into the waters database. They are the Mimbres, Playas, and Nuthocket basins. We get requests from realtors daily for well logs, mostly in the Mimbres basin. This is because the well logs are not yet available online. Sometimes we get the same request from different realtors for the same property, or the same realtor will request the same log a couple of days apart, forgetting they had already requested it. It's been difficult to keep track of received requests within our office and which ones have been answered. Since May of last year, Donna and I created a form for realtors to fill out and submit to our office, our front office technician, Patsy Rodriguez, in order to keep requests all in one place. Once she receives one of these requests through email, walk-in, or phone call, she'll log it in and I will assign it to a technician to research it further. Most of the time, it will require research on our part to find the correct well based on the information given. As stated earlier, our files and well logs are old. There was usually not an address given when the well was drilled, so providing an address isn't always going to find the correct well. We also must investigate ownership. If the well has changed owners, was a change of ownership done, etc. For that reason, we ask for previous owners on this form in case our files have an older owner. In our area, we also have many wells that were permitted for test purposes or construction for sale. Once the property was sold, the new owner should have come in and changed it for domestic or the current use. Many times they tell us they didn't know. So we ask that you make sure you check the purpose of use for what the well is currently being used for. If not, a change purpose of use must be done. The members basin is usually the only basin we must really dig to find the correct well for realtors. We ask for time to get the proper well found for you, but we do the best we can to get back as soon as possible. That's all for District 3. Again, my name is Jennifer Galindo. I'm here in Deming. If you have any questions or concerns, you may contact me at any time. Thank you.
You're awesome, Jennifer. Next up, I've got my friend Cheryl Thacker.
Good morning. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, very good. I can't see myself, so hopefully it continues. Okay, my name is Cheryl Thacker. I'm with the Office of the State Engineer here in Las Cruces. We administer the Lower Rio Grande, the Hot Springs, the Los Animas Creek, Tularosa, Waco, and Salt basins. And Craig Cathy is our district manager here in the office. We have an excellent group of customer service representatives. We call them specialists or professionals, water resources professionals. And we do a rotating schedule, so certain professionals are on duty. But we really appreciate when realtors come in and have done their research first. And so all this information that you've garnered this morning, we really appreciate if you take that time to look into it. And then we can help the realtors as they get need more information beyond that. So that is really important. And we don't have a huge group of resources. So if we can have the realtors do their due diligence as well as they can first, that's super, super helpful. Something that we have an issue with, in particular with the Hot Springs Basin, Tularosa, Waco, and Salt basins, is that there's declarations on file, but often the water right hasn't necessarily been verified. And so as realtors, I really encourage you to make sure that you do some research and look to make sure that possibly whether that land has been irrigated in the past. So one really good, quick and dirty way is to look on Google Earth, for instance, and you can look through the historical imagery. And if it looks like the water right was declared, for instance, in the 50s, but there hasn't been a consistent representation of irrigation, you might want to step back and rethink it. And a lot of times those declarations have what we call intent. Well, I like to tell people I intended to be Miss America, but clearly that didn't work out. So it's just make sure just because you intend to do something doesn't necessarily mean it actually occurred. So, and what's on the declaration isn't necessarily the actual water right. There's an issue, particularly in the lower Rio Grande Basin. It's been very active with the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court, original action 141. So that's a whole nother ball of wax. You may have heard about it, but I'd like to really hone in on the irrigation water rights in what we call the Elephant Butte Irrigation District. And the issue with that is all the water rights that have a groundwater right associated with that land that has been assessed by Elephant Butte, it's a combined right. And so that combined right cannot be transferred to a different purpose. For instance, transferred for cannabis growth, a commercial cannabis. And that's been an issue. I don't think that the realtors necessarily have understood that. So just be cautious that if someone mentions to you that they want to transfer a ground and surface water combined water right to a commercial use, that's just, we don't allow that. Also, no, groundwater only water right, that's possible through an application for change location of well place purpose of use. Also, when a realtor comes in and would like to sell a property or has a buyer and it's within the Elephant Butte Irrigation District, of course, this is an irrigated water right. The first thing to do as a realtor is go to the Elephant Butte Irrigation District and verify that the taxes have been paid, because often, not often, but it does occur where the water right owner has not paid their assessment, but assumes that just because they have a well on that property, they can continue to exercise the groundwater right. Well, once that surface water assessment has been, it's gone, the groundwater right is extinguished. So that's something to be very, very aware of. So go to EBID, get what we call a parcel information report, and make sure that that tax assessment is still being paid. Getting to talking about the basin closures, the hot spring basin, which is primarily around the Truth or Consequences vicinity, it has been closed. So there's no new appropriations at all in that basin. So there have been applications for new appropriations that have been filed in the past. Now, currently, we will not accept any of those. They will be rejected because there's no new water to appropriate. Now, the Lower Rio Grande Basin hasn't been technically closed by an order. However, the water has been fully appropriated, so we will not accept any new appropriations for the most part in the Lower Rio Grande Basin. Also, there's just to let folks know, there's a program, what we call the Amigo metering program, and folks who irrigated, producers who irrigate can apply for a meter, and the state will pay for it. And just contact our office and we can hook you up with that. So it's called the Amigo metering program. Also, you may have heard about the groundwater conservation program. We run that once a year. The program application process has closed, but just so you know, just something to keep in the back of your mind as realtors to verify whether the land that you are selling or purchasing, find out whether it's been part of that groundwater conservation program. And that's something you can contact our office. There's not a whole lot of irrigated acreage, but we hope to get more involved with that. Having said that, that's all I have today. And like I said, you're welcome to contact our office, but I really would appreciate, we would appreciate you folks to do your, do as much research as you can before you call us. That will expedite the whole process. So thank you.
Thanks, Cheryl. That was awesome. And next up, we got Richard from Aztec.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for taking the time and investing a little bit of your day to come in here and jump into the pool of the wild, wonderful world of water rights. I do want to mention we do have a low bandwidth connection up here. We're only 30 megabits, so when we do video conferencing, sometimes this will stutter. So if you don't hear something or you want me to cover something afterwards, have a question, please don't hesitate to ask in the question and answer session. I'll be happy to repeat that information. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm Richard Blecka here in District 5. I'm the Assistant Water Master. I'm going to give you some peculiarities to us up here and give you just a little bit better information about what we do. So District 5, our office is located in Aztec. We're over here on 100 Gossett Drive. Now there's our phone number, and if you'll see that 383 prefix, that goes to Albuquerque, but I can assure you that when you dial in there, it comes back here to the local office. So we do get the call here locally. So where are we here? Here's the map of the county campus where all of the county buildings are located. You'll see in the middle right up here, if I can get my mouse over there, this is a really jumpy mouse. There it is. That's the main administration building where the county clerk, county assessor are located. We are just to the east of that over here where you can see all the little arrows pointing down. We're in a small building. If you blink, you probably drive right by us, but we're closest to the highway up here, Aztec Boulevard, which is 516. So if you're coming in from the west and you're on 516, you can actually turn right in front of the office here, come right to our building. If you're coming from the east and you're coming out of Aztec, you're going to want to turn at the stoplight right there at Oliver, come down and go across the county building parking lot, and then you can get to us. So we have a little unique navigation there, but you can find us, and we're here. So just to give you an idea about our staff here, our degree work here, we've got a very good mix of individuals. We've got hydrology, geology, forestry, mathematics, natural resources, and technology. So we can pretty well get the question answered for you. So let's talk now a little bit about where we are. So the map you're taking a look at here is District 5. You can see the boundaries there over on the east, kind of going to the south. We kind of parallel the Continental Divide as we go down here, but we go down just past Crown Point, just north of Gallup, and then we kind of come back up and go to the western part of the state. So within this screen, if you take a look up at the top, you see all the what looks like little green areas here. Okay, in relation to District 5, that's where our adjudicated water rights are located. So you can see not much of the basin has the adjudicated water rights. So that's just to give you an idea of where the water is at, where we change the change of ownership, the bulk of them. And you can see there's Bloomfield, Aztec, Farmington, go out to Kirtland, kind of give you an idea. So the San Juan River Basin, what are we talking about here? The New Mexico portion of the San Juan River Basin is shown on this map. It is larger than this, and I'll show you in just a moment. But we are part of the Upper Colorado River Basin, which is a part of the Colorado River Basin. So if you're familiar with the news stories that we seem to hear every few weeks about, oh, they're fighting over water out west, well, that's you kind of put us in that one because that's part of that Colorado River Basin. So there's the bigger map. And you can see over here, there's District 5 on the upper left corner of New Mexico. You can see where we sit in relation to the upper basin and the lower basin and the Colorado River Basin as a whole. So 7 states are represented in that, and the nation of Mexico. So for us, what is our claim to fame? Briefly, almost 70% of the surface water in New Mexico flows through the San Juan River Basin. So by the numbers, we can break that down and say, well, what we get, the portion that we get through our rivers up here is approximately 1.6 million acre feet annually. That's about 521 billion gallons if you want to make put into something that might make a little more sense to you. Now, of that, our 2 main rivers, the San Juan, it covers about 1 million acre feet, and the Animas accounts for about the other 600,000 acre feet. This water is shared by the Jicarilla, Navajo, and us. A little more detail, the San Juan River Basin in New Mexico, that's just District 5, don't think about Colorado, just New Mexico, is a closed basin for surface water rights as part of the Navajo Dam construction. No new surface water rights are available. So as we talked, as Jerry spoke earlier about forfeiture and abandonment, any surface water rights lost through that process are gone. We don't get them back. They don't go into a pool to get dispersed someplace else. They're just gone. So we have a fixed amount, and we do everything we can to try to make sure that you use those water rights. However, the San Juan River Basin is currently open for groundwater acquisition, i.e., the wells. We have the two domestic types of wells. We have domestic, which is good for 1 acre foot per year. We have the domestic livestock, which is good for 3 acre feet per year. At this time, we don't have a meter requirement on those unless you go outside the domestic well process, and that's a whole nother round of permitting there. But for the purposes of what y'all work with, this is going to be the one you probably get the most questions on. So let's talk real quick. There we go. How important is the change of ownership? So this is where we'll take a listen to the most popular radio station out there, WIIFM 100.0, your source for personal enrichment. So, as a realtor, with the recent changes nationally to the commission fee structure and all that took place over this past year, this to you and the seller could present a potential value add. Now, why do you say that? Right? Why do I do that? Well, let me present the scenario that we talk about here quite frequently when people come into the office. If you, as a realtor, are representing two sellers, the parcels are pretty much neck and neck for a potential buyer. They're having a hard time figuring out, gosh, which one do we go with? Well, your seller A has already prepared and accomplished change of ownership for the water rights that are on the property. And if there's a well, they also have that change of ownership. Well, that's going to give them the acre feet amount, your diversion. It's going to tell them where that's at on the land. So now they have that information. Now, seller B has not done any of that. So what's going to happen is they're going to say, well, gosh, here's seller A. I've got all this information. The other guy hasn't done it. So what that means for the other buyer is they're going to have to call us. And I'll talk about that here in a second. So let's talk about the numbers in San Juan County. You remember we were talking just a moment ago about how many people had actually done a change of ownership? Well, here's where we can put some math together. In San Juan County, there's approximately 13,000 parcels with adjudicated rights. Less than 50% with a change of ownership accomplished in the last 50 years. Okay, that's 50 years, 5 decades. Of the ones that have actually done that, less than half of those have been updated to the current owner. So you can see a very small percentage have actually come in and done this. So that presents a ton of ambiguity when you're out there trying to work with a potential seller or buyer as to what is exactly available there. So potentially that's a significant amount of potential revenue there. It depends on how you want to market. But my point I'm trying to make is you don't want to wait until the property is listed to encourage that seller to come in and do a change of ownership. You want to be proactive because not all cases will you know that a property owner is going to sell 3 or 4 months ahead, but sometimes going into the winter, people do have an idea they're going to list that parcel in the spring. You want to encourage them immediately. Hey, do you have a change of ownership? Oh, well, we've never done one. Hey, guess what? You want to go ahead and get that done because that makes it much simpler for us on the back end. Let them do the legwork for that. So let's move on to a few points I want to make here before we wrap this up. These are important. The change of ownership document versus the ditch bill. We hear this a lot, and I don't know if some of y'all in the other districts may get that, but it's important to understand the difference. The change of ownership is a document prepared by us that details the water rights or water right on the parcel and where it is. The ditch bill only refers to the monetary amount paid to the ditch company. The ditch bill is not sufficient for proof of a water right. It only verifies that some monies have been paid over a period of time. Those bills also have been known to be incorrect. And current. That's the other one you want to make sure of. This has happened. It's not uncommon. A parcel will sell. They will come in to do the change of ownership, and they'll tell us, "Oh yeah, we found out the seller hadn't paid their ditch bill in the last 10 years, and we've got about $1,500 in back fees that we got to pay." That has happened. We just had one here in the last 2 weeks. That very same occurrence. So you want to make sure that when you're getting ready to do the listing, verify that ditch bill is current. You don't want a surprise on the other side of the transaction. So we're talking about now, where I just mentioned in the prior slide, if no change of ownership is available, and you saw the numbers for our county up here, it falls on the buyer to ultimately verify what is there. You can give them an answer and say, well, it looks like, but ultimately they have to verify that. How do they do that? They're going to have to get a hold of us. They can call or they can come in, but the answer is not going to be as clear and concise as what a change of ownership will give you. We're going to be using language like, well, it looks like, it appears to be, because we have different layers that we're looking at in our GIS mapping. We're trying to find out if water rights have been moved, if part of the property has the water right. And ultimately, the only way to do that is we have to do the research on that particular parcel. So it can be very frustrating for a potential buyer because we just are not able to give them that exact information. Whereas if the change of ownership had been done, then they can actually have a document in their hand that says, here's everything that that parcel contains. So I know that we talked about the prior to this about the forms and preparing change of ownership. We, as a courtesy to the parcel owner, the homeowner that have that have come in, they bring in their deed or copy of the deed. We actually prepare the change of ownership to ensure high information accuracy, and also to go through our county clerk's office to get that properly recorded. Those of you up here know our county clerk can be very particular in how they will accept documentation. We also will do the well permits, the domestic permits over the counter. Again, you bring in a copy of the deed, we'll get that started, and generally we have that issued to you within 2 business days. Now, those of you that are realtors and you own land with a water right, one, have you done your change of ownership? If not, I'm going to be seeing you. You want to come in, you want to get that done. But this goes to anybody that you are transacting business for that potentially has a parcel with a water right. You want to encourage them to get involved in their ditch. Volunteer. Now, why do I say that? In San Juan County, most of the ditches are run by volunteers. There's only a couple that have the sufficient resources to have full-time and part-time staff. So those that are volunteers, they're aging out. We have a number of them that are in their 70s and 80s, and they're tired and they're retired. So now, why is that important that we have people on these ditch boards and run the ditches? Because the state law requires that a ditch have an administrative staff in place in order for us to turn the water on and let it go down the ditch. You don't want to find out the hard way that, whoops, we don't have a board, and guess what? Now you're in crisis mode. So please get involved in your ditch. They generally meet quarterly. Some, I think, they're semi-annual. But I think most everybody's quarterly. And they usually do a pretty good job of publishing that. If you need to know who your ditch is, well, give us a call. We can let you know. We can look that up. So please encourage that.
Thanks, Richard. We're kind of running short on time. So is this about it? Because we've got 3 more minutes.
And just remember, you're the last ones to see these new parcel owners. Encourage them to do their change of ownership. Again, you got the resources that we've talked about prior. You also have a public computer here in our office that's available when we're open. And those of you up here in San Juan, if you would like, we can present a presentation to you. Just let the San Juan County Board of Realtors know, and we can get something set up over the winter. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Next up, we've got Ramona.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ramona Martinez. I'm the District 6 manager. I'm located in the Santa Fe office. We cover the trauma, NPT, Upper Pecos, and Upper Rio Grande basins, essentially northern New Mexico. I don't want to regurgitate things that my colleagues have already shared, so I'm just going to go through some quick tips that I have and just provide some feedback that I've received from my staff. A lot of my staff say that it's extremely helpful for realtors to do some preliminary research. Using the chain of title is a really, really good way to research water rights, especially, referencing David Anderson's earlier presentation. If you have a chain of title, you can go through each name, and that can save everyone a lot of time. Not every basin is abstracted, especially here in District 6. The only abstracted basins we have are the Chama, the NPT, and some of Taos is abstracted. In those cases, I recommend that you all reach out and schedule an appointment to review the file or meet with the water resource specialist. Sometimes these files can be cumbersome, and it really helps if you schedule an appointment with a specialist. That way you don't come in and have to wait a long time to have somebody pull the file for you. We can have that file ready for you and out and really help be available to navigate that file. Just wanted to note that the pot finder is not exact. In some cases, you may have to drive around or even call to get clarification. In some cases, a well may be plotted in the middle of the road or right along the property line. Those are times when you really want to reach out to a specialist and get clarification to make sure that you're working with the correct well. I think it's really helpful to start off with an RG number or even an SD number. If you don't have that, a good way to get a head start on that is at least know the acequia name. It's really helpful to have the SD number because we have a lot of acequia madres. There's tons of them. So if you could provide us with the acequia name, it's a lot easier for us to narrow down what acequia that you're looking for. Just keep in mind that sometimes this research does take time, and I just encourage everyone to be patient and work with us. We will help you as soon as we can. Specific to D6, if you're working in the NPT, you should probably note that on some permits, instead of getting a diversion amount, you're going to get a diversion range. For instance, you're going to see 0.7 to up to 3 acre feet. In those cases, I recommend that you read through the entire permit. That permit will give you the specific consent order. In the NPT pre-basin wells, some pre-basin wells were not adjudicated an exact number. They really are a range. So if you see that, please read the conditions of approval. You'll reference the consent order, and that will give you a clear understanding of why you're going to see a range on that permit. That's about all I have.
Thank you, Ramona. Next up, we got Tim Farmer from our Cimarron office.
Hey, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, folks. I'll try to speed through this. I know we're short of time, but my name's Tim Farmer. I'm with the District 7 office out of Cimarron. We have a staff of 5 that takes care of the northeast corner of the state. And that includes Catherine Berenson. She takes care of the domestic and stock wells. Greg Crateri, the Canadian Basin Manager. Jared Turner helps with the entire basin. And then Alfred C. Chavez Buster, he's the Cimarron Rayado Watermaster. Here's a map of all of the different districts. You see us up here in the northeast corner. We have 3 groundwater basins: the Canadian River Basin, Clayton Basin, and the Tucumcari Basin. Again, there's a map of all the declared basins. We also have 2 surface water basins that we administer: the Canadian Basin, the Canadian River Basin, and the Dry Cimarron River Basin. Here you see us up here in the northeast corner. Most of it's the Canadian River Basin, and this little strip up here is the Dry Cimarron. Within our district, we have 5 adjudicated areas: the Cimarron River, Rayado River, Bermejo River, Rico River, and the Dry Cimarron. And that is surface water adjudications only. Here's a map that probably needs to be updated. It's active adjudications. And we have one on the completed adjudications. I want to touch base on declarations because that's most of our workload up here in District 7. But first, I want to talk about the elements of a water right. We have the ownership, the amount, who owns the water, who owns the land on which that water is applied to the land, the amount, how many acre feet, where does that water come from, what are the points of diversion, are they groundwater points of diversion, surface, or like a river pump? Place of use, where is that water put to beneficial use at? The location of the place of use. Purpose of use, is it irrigation or industrial, commercial? What's the purpose of use of the water right? And maybe most importantly is the priority date. Because what I want to touch on is declarations, and that comes into play quite a bit for the declarations. Jerry already talked about the types of water rights. We have adjudicated water rights. That's water rights adjudicated through the courts. If you have a permitted water right or a declared water right and you go through the beneficial use process, you can eventually have that water right licensed. So that's the next best type of water right. When you change the water right, any kind of existing water right, a permit is required. And then what we're going to talk about today is declared water rights. You can declare a water right as long as the use for surface water, if it's prior to 1907, if there were man-made works that put that water to beneficial use prior to March 19th, 1907. As far as groundwater goes, if there was a groundwater use that was in existence prior to the basin being declared. For example, the Clayton Basin was declared September 23rd, 2005. If that water was being put to beneficial use prior to that date, then you can file a groundwater declaration for that. Again, here's the map of all the declared groundwater basins, and each basin has a date of when that basin was declared. Filing a declaration, you can obtain the forms through the district office or from our website, www.osenm.gov. Declarants are welcome to come in and sit with the staff, and they can help them, advise them on how to fill out the forms, the paperwork. The declarants will need to provide a copy of their recorded warranty deed, showing that they own the land on which the water right's located. And when they fill out the declaration form, the declarant name will have to match the warranty deed. Declarants need to bring all of their land and water papers because they need to provide maps of the place of use, the locations, and the locations of the points of diversion. A filing fee is due when the declaration is submitted. It's a $1 for each groundwater right, and $10 for surface water rights, and $10 if you're declaring a stock tank. Declarations are filed in triplicate with original notarized signatures. The reason that's important is because just like the chains of ownership, you're going to file that with the county, and they'll need an original signature. The declarations will be reviewed for completeness and correctness. If something's missing, that declaration will be returned. If we receive the declaration and everything looks correct, a field check will be scheduled from the district office. The declaration is basically, for example, the farmer rancher telling us what they've got. It's not a permit. It's a statement from the water right owner, and what he tells us is all those elements of the water right. He talks about who the owner is, how much water he uses, where that water is being used, where the water comes from, where are the points of diversion, and what is the purpose of use. And again, most importantly, is where the priority date. When was the water first placed to beneficial use? The declarant needs to provide all essential facts and on the documentation for historical use. And that can be like meter readings, homestead survey acts, maps, any kind of maps. It's a possibility that even before the basin was declared, even though a driller did not need a permit to drill the well, he may have a well record, a well log or well record. That would be good information to file with your declaration. Again, declaration's not a permit. It's basically the water right user telling us what he's got and how they're using it. So there are no conditions of approval attached to the declaration. Why file a declaration? The main reason to file the declaration is because it protects your water right. For example, if you were a farmer, let's say in the Clayton Basin, and your neighbor, somebody buys the property next to you and you want to, they're going to build let's say something like Intel or General Mills, somebody that uses a lot of water, so they're going to file for a new appropriation. If we don't know about the water right, we can't protect it. How you put your water right on record with the Office of the State Engineer is through a declaration. If we know those wells exist and that water rights exist, then we can use it in the model so that we can protect your water right. A declaration also adds value to your property. Now, just because if you have a water right, just because it's not on record with the state engineer's office doesn't mean that you don't have a water right. But if, let's say, if an appraiser or a bank or somebody calls and says this property is being advertised with a water right, and they call us and they say Farmer Brown says he has water right on this farm, and we check our records and there's nothing there, it doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't have a water right, but it's not on record, so we can't quantify anything for that inquiry. A declaration must be filed before any future permits. Let's say if there's a farmer that's been there prior to the basin being declared, he's got 100 acres and 4 wells, and one of his wells goes down, he needs to file for a new well, a supplemental well, or do a change location of well. We can't do anything until we have that farm unit and those wells on record with the state engineer's office. So that slows down the process. If he needs a well, what we'll have to do is he'd have to file a declaration. We'd have to go verify his points of diversion, place of use, purpose of use. We'd have to verify that before we could even contemplate for him applying for an application for a new well or a changed location of well. So it's good to have all that paperwork taken care of ahead of time. And then again, if you have a well that's going to need repair work, if it needs to be repaired and deepened, or they need to work on the casing, a licensed well driller can't touch that well unless he has a permit. There's no way to obtain a permit unless it's on record with the state engineer's office. And again, the way you get that well on record with our office is you file the declaration.
Okay, Tim, we got to wrap it up. We got one more speaker.
Okay. And that about covers it for us. Sorry, I tried to hurry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The next up is Michael with the New Mexico Environment Department Liquid Waste Division, please.
Oh, let's see here. Share, there it is. All right, I'm going to talk about property transfer evaluations in brief. So we set up here. Like I said, my name is Michael Broussard, Liquid Waste Program Manager in New Mexico Environment Department, Environmental Health Bureau. Some of the key points of what I want to cover, so I'm going to go pretty fast here, is property transfer evaluations went into effect back in 2005, and that's throughout the state of New Mexico. So, and it's been the most significant tool to protect the environment and protect our groundwater resources and surface water resources, as well as public health. And this has just been my experience over the past 12 years with the department. The biggest question we get from realtors, do we need to do an evaluation? I became the yes man, like on that Albuquerque car dealer commercial. Yes, you need to do one unless there's no system or you abandon that system prior to. And I'll talk a little bit more about abandoning systems. But I provide this training class for the Santa Fe Association of Realtors where I go into this over 3 hours and talk about it. So what are some of the things I want to cover? Some of the terms that we use, definitions and questions. There's established systems, permitted systems, unpermitted systems. Registering a system. If it's unpermitted, you got to register it, or you can modify a system. Okay. Abandoning a system. So those are some of the things that I want to talk about, but also briefly touch on prohibited terminology, things that just my pet peeve list. Okay. And what is a property transfer evaluation? Why does it have to be done? Who's authorized to do those? Is the owner required to have it done? Can the buyer have a property valuation done? As well as how much does it cost? Well, that's not necessarily something, but what happens if there is no inspection prior to the transfer? Now, this established system, I want to talk about that. It hasn't been used in the previous 10 years. And that doesn't include cesspools. Cesspools became illegal in September 73, but this is just one of them where we had the Buckhorn Saloon down in Socorro. They wanted to put in a restaurant and they said, hey, we had an established system on the property. What are we looking for? Has it been in use within the past 10 years? But most importantly, what were the lot size requirements at the time it was done? Well, back in 1803, when it was established, they probably had a privy, and that was it. So that is an established system. Believe it or not, we still issue permits for privies. And this, I just thought they had this one in. This is a privy in Cundio, New Mexico. I don't know if it's in use, but it's got a wonderful handrail there, you know. But what does unpermitted mean? Unpermitted means the department can't find a permit for it. We don't have any record of it, and the owner can't produce it. So that means you have an unpermitted system, okay? It's considered to be unpermitted. Someone may come up with a permit, a valid permit at some point in the future, but it's still considered to be unpermitted. What are your options if you have an unpermitted system? Do the inspection or find that system and abandon it. You can't just say, let's do nothing. If you have an inspection done, you will either register or modify that system, okay? So you're trying to get a permitted system. What does abandoning a system mean? Well, we go back to the 10 years. If it's been in use within the previous 10 years, it's not abandoned. But if it hasn't, you've effectively abandoned that system, or there's a specific physical process of abandoning those systems, putting the tank out of use as well as any of the pipes. Now, some of the prohibited terminology, now I say this because say don't liquid waste our time. Don't liquid waste your time in having a discussion about property transfers if someone's using the term grandfathering. It's an ambiguous term. It really has no definition. The owner of the property says, hey, I'm grandfather. I can do anything I want illegally. That's what they're thinking. This is why the conversation never gets to a resolution, okay? Don't use the term pass or fail when you talk about transfer evaluations. It's subjective.
Michael, we lost your voice.
Makes the argument go on forever. We also get complaints where they say, hey, their system is legal or illegal. The only illegal system is a cesspool. Any other terminology said, oh, it's illegal. It's just prolonging the discussion that's not necessary. Like for like, they will say, hey, I have a cesspool, so I continue to have a cesspool. I can replace it with a like for like system. That term is sometimes used. It is ambiguous. It is not correct, and it just perpetuates the arguments. The other term is recommend versus required. You hire an evaluator, he recommends that you do something to the system. The department requires that you do something. If you're a public health hazard or you're a threat to the environment, your system is, the department requires you to do things. And that's indicated on the last page of the inspection. Anything else the evaluator says, they're recommending that you install risers. They're recommending that you repair a pipe or something of that nature, okay? So those are terms that keep you from wasting your time A property transfer evaluation is just a snapshot or record of the design of the system, the size of the system, is it functioning, how compliant it is there paperwork on it? But it's a private contractual agreement between the owner and that evaluator. The department's only involved because we dictate the form that they have to submit, the contents, and then they have to turn it into our office and we receive it and stamp it. If you have a transfer evaluation that is not marked as received by NMED, it is not a valid official record to serve for the purpose of a property transfer. We had the problem in one area in New Mexico where some of the evaluators were never turning those in, or they were turning them in 6 months later. It must be completed and turned in within 15 days, or else it is not a valid record. Okay, so remember that. Why evaluate them? It's the best time. If we don't evaluate those that transfer, they'll never get looked at again. Bernalillo County went into a process of evaluating every 10 years. Just because you want to keep up with these, you want to find those systems that have site and soil limitations, the size is not proper. But most of all, this property transfer evaluation is a consumer protection issue. They need to know what they're doing, but it also get what they're buying, but it also gives us an opportunity to find the public health hazards and those that are threatening the environment, those that have the highest potential to pollute our groundwater. Okay. Additionally, it allows us to talk about abandoning a system properly because that is a safety issue. Okay. The department authorizes and approves evaluators, licensed installers in those categories. There's a fifth category where people have adequate experience and training. They're allowed to do those. And there's another category where they're registered sanitarians, professional engineers, or some nationally certified installers. We don't see many of those. But now the common questions, is the owner required to have the system inspected? Well, the answer is that I always give is yes, they have to have it inspected. Can the buyer have the system inspected? Well, yes, the buyer can have it inspected. And one of the questions they get, well, is how much does it cost? Well, don't ask me. I work for the department. I don't work that. I don't deal with costs. But what happens if there's no inspection done? Well, the buyer assumes full responsibility. It's all their fault. They got what they purchased. Okay. The bottom line is the department cannot give you permission to violate the regulation. Regulation says a property transfer has to be done and provided to the buyer at the time of transfer. Okay. So that's what has to happen. Some of the recent cases that we had, Ruidoso fire, where the entire property burned down, no structures left. They can't figure out where the system is. The buyer wants to buy the property. It's a great investment. They don't know where those systems are. They says, hey, can you give us permission to not do a transfer evaluation? Well, we can't. They're going to have to find out a way to locate those systems, abandon those systems, and or they're going to have to mark them off so that any future development would include those. You don't want to build your house on top of septic tank, okay? Septic tanks are very dangerous, as well as old cesspools. The underground voids that collapse at any minute, and there's been numerous people killed in New Mexico falling into underground septic tanks. This is why we have an abandonment process that requires documentation to be filed. That documentation protects the owner of the property as well as the contractor who did the abandonment, because it gives a specific location for where that tank is and they abandon it. We have properties where they have multiple old tanks and the contractor goes out and just doesn't do the paperwork and says, well, I abandoned the system. Well, lawyers don't care if you say you abandon it. They're looking for somebody to be liable. And if you say you abandoned it and somebody fell in the tank on the property, then the presumption is for them is you didn't do it properly. Okay, so they're looking for liability. So that concludes my portion briefing. If you have any questions.